Hello and welcome to the Storied Human. I'm Lynn Thompson. My guest today is Sean McMann. He started out right out of college, recruited at one of the largest data firms. His future seemed bright, but 8 years later, after seeing behind the curtain of some of the largest corporations today, he recognized that the system was broken. He quit at the height of his career when working the least hours, but making the most money he ever had. He bet everything, including his money, reputation, and time, to try to fix the problem of the corporate jungle. He shares his insights in his new book, Hacking the Corporate Jungle: How to Work Less, Make More, and Actually Like Your Life. Can't wait to dig into that. Welcome, Sean.
Thanks, Lynn. Super excited to be here.
So, how can we hack how did you even get to that point where you could write that book?
Um, I guess that's a good question. A lot of trial and error.
Yeah.
Um, but I think the underlying theme through it all was I was fearless, even though I
Yeah.
was scared shitless most of the time. I'd ask the questions no one else seemed to have the courage to. I walked up to the leader I wanted to meet and just introduced myself. I put myself in the room, I guess, so to speak. And I guess that goes back to my parents and how they raised me and some of my unique childhood experiences, which we can get into, more later if you'd like.
I just love to hear about that. Like, how did you become that person? Because that isn't everybody at work. Most people are too afraid to do the kinds of things you did.
Yeah. So I guess it goes back to my mom and dad. They're weird. I guess is a way to say it. In a really great way. Like I had great parents. I have no trauma, which I know is big for a lot of people right now. I have no real childhood trauma. My parents were great, but they also had some really weird nuances. Like instead of going on vacation most years, we would renovate a part of our house or redo our front lawn. Or one year, like when I was 7, I got my own hammer because we were putting on our own roof. And my little brother was 5, and he had his own hammer too. And it's, like looking back, it was just like, what? That's an insurance liability. Like, what were you doing? But they instilled in me from a very young age. Like if you work hard enough and you pay attention to what's going on, you can really do anything. And so, for lack of a better term, it gave me, I would almost say, like this sort of naivety that.
Hmm.
Um, give it a shot, give it a swing. Like the worst that can happen is somebody says no or someone tells you to back off. But more times than not, it's the people who are gung ho, I guess. And I guess learned throughout my life and throughout my childhood, like if you volunteered to do something, even if you completely stunk at it, people would at least give you a shot. And then at that point, even
Hmm.
if you didn't get to continue doing it, you at least got direct hands-on, direct one-on-one feedback as to why you don't get to keep doing it. And
You
so,
know
yeah, I
what's
guess
really
go ahead.
this is just so interesting to me because I just read an article that said if kids do chores, if they do real work from the time they're young, they did the study on the ones that did chores had greater success later in life. And I was saying I should have had my kids do more chores. Not that my kids aren't successful, they are, but that just makes sense to me that you were given this sort of sense of mastery and self-esteem, I think, that you could
Oh,
do
absolutely.
things. And I love that they were weird in that great way. So they were unconventional, a little
Very
bit
unconventional.
unconventional.
Yeah, very
So
unconventional.
so here you are, you're a hot shot. They recruit you straight out of college. You got the golden ticket, right? You're going to go, you can see your future right in front of you. How did it change?
Mm, I guess I always had this imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
And from the very get-go, I felt like I shouldn't have been let in the door. Like
Oh,
I started in this new grad program, and Aletta, and for those of you listening who don't know, like a lot of large corporations have a similar program where
yeah.
they recruit, a class 10 to 20, sometimes 40 kids straight out of college to join the company. And in a lot of those programs, you get shuffled around and you get to try little positions in every department to really see where you fit. And in my program, I started with 14, I guess, students or, 20 somethings. And there were only 2 prior that ever went through the program. And so we were really the first like real program. And the first day we all sit down and we all like talk about what we had done the last, this last summer, or what we've been up to the last year. And I had graduated like 2 months prior. And so like I think the biggest thing I had done was, I might have cleaned my house and maybe went on like a 3-day road trip or something with my fiance at the time. Like I wasn't, and I went back to the old coffee shop I'd worked at through college, make ends meet until the job started. And so I hadn't done really anything of note. And I remember I must have been last or second to last to go, and everyone had these incredible stories like, oh yeah, I just spent a year at sea, or I just finished up an internship at Google, or
My goodness.
my dad flew me to Paris, and I just spent the last 3 months, in Paris, and it was like, and a couple of them had like last names. That were very resonant, I would say, in the company. Like their dads or their uncles were we all knew who they were, right? We knew who
Yeah,
their
right.
families were. But for me, I was just like, how? Like my dad he'd tell you, he was a truck driver his entire life, and my mom was a teacher. And so I was sitting there, like listening to all these intros, like, how did I get in? Like, I
What am
don't
I
think I
doing
should.
here? Yes.
Yeah, I don't think I should be here. And I think at one point, because of this new grad program and the nature of it, we all had mentors. And the gal
Mhm.
who interviewed me and let me in, and ultimately had passed me to the people who had hired me on, I eventually sat down with her and was like, did you make a mistake? Like, I don't know if I put it in those kind of words, but I was like, why am I kind of here? And don't get me wrong, I'm grateful to be here. Like, please don't, kick me out. But why am I here? And I think that was the most telling, and one of the most informative conversations I've really had about how sometimes market dynamics that you don't get taught about work. Because she essentially said, like, you worked all through college, which you can't say about any of your fellow new
Mm.
grads. And you have had the most work experience. And at that time, I'd already like ran a coffee shop as an assistant manager. I'd climbed my way up to shift supervisor at one of the Panera Breads near me that I worked at for 3 years. I'd been a delivery driver at a nearby, Chinese restaurant that my neighbors owned. And so it's like I had worked all these odd jobs, but I had worked. I think my first
Yeah.
job I'd worked since I was 15.
Wow.
And my last 2 years of college, I took like 18 semester credits, and I worked like almost 28 to 30 hours a week. And so I was always doing something. I was always
Whoa.
busy.
Okay.
Yeah,
So she saw what that indicates, like that ability to, she already saw the record of how
exactly.
you work. Yeah. That's so
Exactly.
cool. You know,
Yeah.
I went to one of those when my kids were looking for colleges, and you go to accepted students day. Or no, it wasn't that. I'm sorry. It was like open house, and
Sure, sure.
everybody's like interested, right? I think it was Gettysburg, which is pretty cool school. The guy got up and said, if you've been babysitting, like maybe one of you has been babysitting and you've been babysitting for like 7 or 8 years, does that impress us? And people like giving different answers. And he's like, that super impresses us, because people forget it's not like it's not the elitism of the job or the level of the job. It's the responsibility. It's the ability to stay with something. And I just thought that was brilliant. That's how they look at things. It's like you were able to handle that responsibility of the coffee shop, and the babysitter was trusted by the parents to handle the responsibility for children. It's a great indicator. So she shared that with you. I think that's great.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I've never thought about it in that sort of light. I guess I did have a lot of responsibility growing up, and
And you
through those
kind of took it for
positions.
granted because I think you had responsibility young. You got that hammer and you're building things. And I just think it builds like that confidence and that trust in your abilities that not everybody has when they're young. I think some people get there, but your
Yeah.
parents almost gave you like an express lane to that level
Oh,
of
I like that turn of
diligence.
phrase. Express lane. I'm going to tell them that next time I see them. I think they'll
It's a
like that. I'll
nicer way
fight
of
you.
saying, you made
Yeah.
me work.
Yeah.
You made me work when I was 7. Yeah. But I love that. No, it makes total sense. So did you feel better after you talked to her?
Oh, I did. Yeah.
Good.
And then she made me feel super better. And then my first mentor, who I actually write about in my first book here, she was very similar. And she told me flat out, she was like, I was the one who wanted to hire you. And come to find out, I worked for three directors at this point in my first role. And out of the three, only one of them actually wanted to hire me. And she was the one who wanted to hire me. And I'll never forget her. She was a true salesperson, which I think a lot of organizations have lost nowadays or really
Yeah.
struggle to find. For those
Yeah.
of you who don't know, like true salespeople, they're a different breed, but they bring in as much as they drive most people in an organization absolutely crazy. She had a skill set that you really that companies pay through the nose for
Wow.
because she
When it's
really
done
was
well, it's so impressive. I have a
exactly.
friend like that. She
Yeah.
could literally sell, how they say you could sell ice to the Eskimos. She could. And
Oh,
and
absolutely.
they wouldn't mind.
Mhm.
She's very sincere. It's like very cool when you have those skills. So yeah, so she fought for you.
She fought for me, and I think to this day she might have been one of the only geniuses I've ever worked for. And she was this tiny, blonde, small Jewish woman, and she always told you like it was. But she was just a force. Like she was so tiny. It was such a dichotomy, right? Because she was so
Right.
tiny in physical stature, but she was such a force in the room. She was so intelligent. We'd get out of meetings, and she'd be like, "How do you think that went?" I'm like, "Well, they seem interested. I think we can sell them a contract." And she was like, "No." They're not going to be interested for at least another 6 months. And she just
Whoa.
knew that. I know. Yeah, she changed and she did it differently. And we'd get out of, most people, if you've worked in corporate at all, Lynn,
I
have
have
you ever worked in corporate? Okay. And
only
so,
in corporate. I'm a technical writer and
oh, yeah.
the way I deal with not I'm not a good employee,
Hmm.
so I'm a consultant. Yeah.
Okay. That's a good way to put it. That's great advice for everyone. If you're a bad employee in corporate, everyone go into consulting.
Yeah. I just don't
um,
enjoy it. I'm not cut out for it. I'm more entrepreneurial. So this is how I
yeah.
deal with that. But anyway, what I thought of first when you said sales was how many times I work a lot in IT, and I was thinking
Hmm.
how many times salespeople promised stuff the developers down the line could not deliver. So
Hmm.
there's that mismatch sometimes. There's that contentious relationship with sales.
Yeah.
Promise the moon, promise the moon.
Yeah, and she was, and I will say, my mentor, who I'm talking about, she was so great at things like that. Like we would almost promise the moon, and then she'd always, and I later found out this was just a tactic it was kind of a double-edged sword. It was a tactic where it helped solve that exact problem of over-promising and under-delivering that you're talking about, Lynn. But then it also allowed us to charge more. And she'd say, well, she was just flat out honest with clients
Yeah.
when
Oh,
others
that's great.
weren't, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah, she was just like, I don't think we can do that, but we'd love to. Let us get with the team and let you know. And then we talk
That's
to the
so
team and
good.
they'd be like, oh yeah, we could probably figure that out. It's going to take
Yeah.
longer though. And she would
Yeah.
go back to the client and be like, here's the contract, but it's
Yeah.
2x what we quoted you. And they would sign the thing. And it was
Yeah.
just like, how did that happen? Like that's
Because
not
she built that trust. They trusted her.
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah,
That's so cool.
she was
Yeah.
great. I'm
She
very
sounds
fortunate I worked
wonderful.
for her. Yeah.
So as you went along, you're starting to see, I did read in your description, like you were the one that was often given the extra bonuses, you were given, more often than others or a larger increase. You began to see that you were almost, it sounded to me like a disruptor compared to people who were more afraid to say stuff.
I would agree. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think there was to that point, I think disruptor sometimes has this like it's over glorified or a negative
Yeah.
connotation, you know what I mean? Or it sounds really sexy. And it's really
Yeah.
not because being a disruptor is sometimes being in the meeting where the boss is talking and
Hmm.
stops talking and everyone knows, okay, this is where we all leave the room and talk about it later. And I was the guy who was like, actually that doesn't I'm confused. Could you
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
play
Yeah.
that back for me? And
I
it's
love
those
that.
yeah, it's so when we say disruptor, you're totally right, Lynn, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I guess what I'm trying to say is being a disruptor oftentimes is just saying the thing you're scared to, going into the
Yes.
fear, like,
Yes.
and being the voice in the
Yeah.
room of reason. And then, what I didn't realize when I was younger and what I started finding as I started networking and talking to all these people, I'm naturally, extroverted. And so I have naturally extroverted tendencies. And so I would naturally start to talk to people and being that person in the room. There's a fine line between driving people crazy and like just wanting to hear yourself talk. But if you can balance it well, you build up confidence and respect in other people because they're like, oh my gosh, he said the thing I was too scared to. He
Yeah.
said the thing I wanted to. And it kind of puts you in this place of being a natural leader without the title. And that's
Right.
ultimately, I think,
Right.
what sets you up for a really great foundation to eventually get the title.
I was going to say, as a contractor, somebody who's
As
not
a
an
contractor,
employee,
yeah.
I was the person who often said the things they wanted to say.
Yeah.
So it was really cool. Like I could just say, well, what about this? And they were like afraid to say it. And it's a wonderful place to be. And then they really are grateful and they know they can count on you. And it's just a wonderful kind of trust thing. So you were that person.
Oh, I totally agree. And exactly as it sounds like your experience can speak to as well. It's like once you become that person or once you
Yeah.
are that person,
Yep.
everyone else kind of gets inspired to be too. And then it just changes the culture. That's really how you change the culture is
Yeah.
then everybody's like, well, Sean's going to say it if I don't. I might as well say it, you
Yeah.
know? And then
Yeah.
everyone starts to get a little stronger and a little bit bolder. And before you know it, you're doing stuff on your team that you're proud about and you're telling your family about it.
Yeah.
And everyone's doing it. And that's it's fun. And then
It
work
is
takes
fun.
a whole
It
different
is.
kind of method. Yeah,
And people know that you care enough to speak up. That's really
exactly.
cool.
Well said.
So you're that person, right? The years go by, you start to see
Hmm.
stuff you're not real happy about. All of a sudden, you realize I'm working less hours than I worked before. I'm
Hmm.
making more money than I've ever made. Most people would say, "Hey, this is great." Like what made you decide, "Nah, I'm not going to stay around for this."
I guess it was a few culminating things. I had two young boys at the time. My kids were 3 and 1,
Wow.
and and I had the house and the marriage, cars in the driveway. I had the dream. I mean,
Yeah.
the bank owned 80% of it, but on paper, it looked like I had the dream. And I thought, one day I was sitting in my office or my boy's nursery, and I was thinking to myself, like, if this is the dream, why does it feel like a nightmare? And then like if I teach my kids like this is okay and this is how we're supposed to feel as men or as people, I was like, then I'm really not doing them any emotional, spiritual favors. And and so I guess I think COVID had a lot to do with it, but I guess it really all came to a head when one of my old bosses left and she was replaced with a new VP. And in talking with my old boss, kind of on her exit interview, she said, "Sean, if you play your cards right, in 15, 20, maybe 30 years, you could run this place."
Oh,
And the place was $1 billion company. It was an 8-figure salary we were talking about, maybe 9 figures. Like that was, that's why I went to business school. It was like that was the dream.
yeah.
And I just started thinking to myself, I was like, 30 years? Like, if in
That's a
30
long
years
time.
I could, 30, exactly. I mean, not only is that a long time, but then what would I be doing? And, when you're making the most and working the least, I think guilt enters the picture. And in addition to that boss telling me, you'll be able to run this place one day, I had another boss just say, "Hey, you earned it. You've earned it. Just enjoy it. Have fun, lay back, get some massages, like relax. You've earned this. You deserve it." And as I told you about my parents earlier, like they worked their asses off and never made, like I think I was 26 when I eclipsed my dad's annual paycheck, like when I started making
Wow.
more than my dad ever had. And he worked for the same company for 30 plus years. And so that was
Oh,
tenureship and loyalty and everything. And so like that just never jived with me. It was like, no, I know a lot of people who have worked in areas and industries that really run a city. And I was, as COVID told us, like my job is not essential. I was not essential. I should not be making that much money. And and I realized,
that's a terrible feeling. Yeah, that is.
yeah, yeah. And so I think the guilt set in, and then as my brain works, when you start to feel overwhelmed, I guess you start to
Yes.
very intellectually and very logically look for a solution. Um, and in looking for the solution, I realized I thought the corporations were a ticking time bomb. And I thought that for two reasons. I thought, one, the current state of them is just unsustainable. It's going to, kill the planet if it continues. And then two, I thought, if I'm managing this company, putting myself in leadership's position, if I'm managing a company like this and I have these leaders who are working less and making the most, eventually, as the boss, my job would probably be to outsource as much as possible to robotics or AI. And so, by very definition, like eventually, if I was running the place, my job would probably threaten my current role right now. And so it kind of becomes, then you start to really see the house of cards for what it is. And you're like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, like my
Yeah.
job one day is going to be put my old self out of a job. Um, and that's yeah, that gives you an existential crisis, I guess.
Yeah.
But it
It
also,
didn't
I
sit right
think
with you. Yeah. You
it
saw
didn't
it.
sit right with me.
You
Yeah.
saw
Yeah,
you saw where it was going. Well,
exactly.
especially, I mean, one thing I'm always arguing is like there you can't it's not sustainable with how much CEOs make and that structure.
Correct.
And it's so much more than the lowest paid worker, and it's so much more than any other industrialized nation. It kind of
Hmm.
bugs the what out of me. But
Oh, I think that's
not
in
be
the news right now, right? With the USA
I hope.
healthcare CEO, and oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah,
I hope
everyone's talking about it.
it's hard to go back though. Once you hit that kind of crazy level, it's hard to convince people to go back. But my argument is always like, hey, be wealthy. That's great, but this is not sustainable. How can you keep running a company where you're laying people off and giving the person who laid them off more and more money? So I can see what you must have been going through. It's a weird
Yeah,
environment.
well said. Well said. Yeah. Wow, there's so much there I want to talk about and unpack. I don't I don't know what direction you want to take this,
I
but
don't
no, I
know why I
totally
threw
agree.
that
I
in
totally
there.
agree.
You're
Yeah.
just really like, hitting the points for me. So what I really want to know is how were you able to make that step away? Like it all makes sense that you're thinking ahead, you're realizing where it might be going. You're not pleased with that, that other people are saying to you, it's fine, you earned it, just stick with it, relax, get a massage. But what really gave you the courage to step away? That's what we love to hear on the Storied Human is when did that transformation happen and how did you have that courage? Because that's hard.
Mhm. I'll have to think. I'd like to say it was like one moment. Um,
It often is.
I yeah, I mean, it felt like a buildup, but let me think. I'm sure there was one moment. The one that comes to mind, and I would say up to this point, I had already spent, you know, um, in a position of power, in a leadership position with my own team. I had already done quite a bit of work in not outsourcing my work, but giving it to others. Giving, and the term in management that we say, right, is giving responsibility to
Right.
others so they can learn more. And so I'd
Empowering
already given a
others.
lot of, yeah, yeah. So I'd already given a lot of my responsibility to others, and they were doing well. And throughout COVID, I had already seen my entire team replaced because everybody had, there were a lot of people having epiphanies and a lot of people changing their minds about what they wanted. And one of my buddies, he came back from a long weekend and was just like, "I'm moving to Spain. I'm going to grad school, and I'm going to work for a cruise ship afterwards." And he's doing that. He went to grad school right after COVID, and so there was a lot of change in the air. And
Yeah.
I think through all that, I saw everyone was replaceable. And so first hurdle I had was I can't leave the team. I can't leave all these great people that I work for or work with. That wouldn't be fair to them. And then having to replace the team once over already, I saw it. As much as it can depress us, that everyone's replaceable, including
Right.
me. And so that meant, I wasn't really insulting anyone if I left the right way and gave everyone ample time. And so to answer your question, the moment that really struck me is I had really put all the ducks in a row. Everything was set up and I was ready to go. And then I got stuck. It's like that high dive moment where you're on the edge of the high
Oh
dive, your
yeah.
toes are over the
Oh,
water and
it's
you're like,
hard. It's hard.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I sat there, I think, for months. I would love to tell you I had the courage to just go right away. And I think I sat there for months. And I was dating a gal at the time and we were out on a walk. We went for like regular walks because I wasn't working much. So this was like a 2 hour walk on a Tuesday in the afternoon, right? And I had a one-on-one right before the walk with one of my team, one of the folks who worked for me, and then I had a one-on-one after this walk. And so that was really all I had from like noon to 5 o'clock. I had two half-an-hour meetings, and that was really all I had to do all day. And so me and her, we went on a walk, and we were walking around this park I used to live next to, and she says, when you do this, because she knew my dreams, she knew what I was talking about. She was like, I'm going to do this, and she goes, when you're going to do this, when you do this, people are going to think you're nuts.
Yeah.
And there was something about that just like it was like I know that like that's why it sounds I guess cold-hearted, but that's why I'd hired a great lawyer for my divorce. And like my ex-wife and I, or my former wife and I, had such an ironclad divorce, and like everything was mutually agreed on, and we have everything in writing, is because like I had known almost a year and a half, 2 years out, that when I did this, the first response from everyone around me was, "Oh my God, he's having a midlife crisis." And like my brother even joked about that, like, "You're in the middle of your midlife crisis. Let's not take your opinion too far." And it was like I knew, I had all these build-up moments where I knew what was going to happen. And the minute she said that, it clicked for me, like, that you've prepped for it. You've done your
Wow.
thing. You have all these contingencies. Like, you're ready.
Yeah.
It's time to go.
Oh,
And then
that's
from
so
there,
cool.
I waited for the right moment. And eventually the right moment came along where it was like, I just can't do this anymore. I have to go. And I guess the moment was I was recently put on a major hotel chain account. And a couple times throughout my career, I had flipped something. Like a relationship was sour, a client was upset, and I had gone in and been like, okay, brass tacks, this sucks. Nobody's happy. I'm assigned to it now because I'm trying to fix
Wow.
it, and I need everyone to
That's
be honest,
cool. Yeah.
And it was another one of those accounts where I was brought into a major, everyone knows the brand. I won't say its name, but everyone knows the brand. It's a worldwide brand, and I was brought into that account to fix it, or at least fix our team's portion of it. And I was on it for about a week, and then when the managing VP asked me, like, "How are you doing? How's it working with the team?" Just trying to like catch speed of like, when do you think we can do this? Trying to get my take. We were having a Zoom like this, and I looked her straight in the eye, and I was like, "Kelly, I can't do this. Like, I don't care anymore. Like, I'm like, I want to do a good job for you, but I don't care anymore. I can't do this for you. And it wouldn't be fair to you for me to stick around. Like, I want you to know, come Friday, I'm giving everybody my 3 weeks. I'm quitting."
Wow. Yeah, but
Um,
it is hard to fake
yeah,
caring. I mean, that's when you reach that point, you can't pretend to care.
yeah. No, and well, you'd be surprised how many people in corporate America, I would say, do
Well, they try.
that. As
They
you know,
try.
yeah, they try.
They try.
But no, a friend of mine, I guess before that, had also said, there's something about keeping your dignity, and you have to make sure
Oh,
that the
yeah.
decisions you make in life, even if they're not always the most
Yeah.
financially smart or sound,
Right.
if you can respect yourself at the end of the day, you're doing something right. And so I guess those three moments together really created that leap off moment, and
That's
gave me the
amazing.
courage
So
to
did
jump.
people think you were crazy?
Um, I waited 3 weeks until after, like 3 weeks until my last day. So it was like,
Yeah.
my last day was the end of April, and it was 3 weeks into May, and I was finally at like a brunch or something with my family, and I was about to get up and leave. And I remember being like, I should probably tell them. I've been out of work now for 3 weeks. Like, now's probably a good time. And so I was like, floated the idea, like, hey, just to let you know, I quit, months ago, and this is what I'm doing. I'm writing my first book. I'm trying to fix this, and I don't necessarily know where it's leading, or how I'm gonna, what the long term plan is. But this just, following my intuition. This is what needs to happen now. And yeah, I think the first was my older brother. Are you having a midlife crisis? My mom was like, "Oh God, Sean, like I'm gonna worry about this. Do I need to worry? Are you okay? Like, do you need to talk to someone?" And then my dad, he was silent, and I'll never forget it. He's staring at me, and he's silent. He's to my right, if you can imagine, and he at our family table. So he's at the head of the table. It's this big rectangle, and he's staring at me. And finally, everyone's silent, noticing Dad hasn't said anything. And then Dad goes, "I think you're stupid. I think you're really stupid
Oh,
for
no.
giving up such a great job at such a great pay. Like, you had worked, all through school for everything for that. Like, and he kind of stopped there, and then he just got up, frustrated, got up, he went into his bedroom.
God.
And I think like like, "Are you okay?" And, then I'm not defending myself, but like, "Yeah, I'm fine. Like, this is what I'm doing. I'm writing a book. I already have 50,000 words, like, a year and a half and 9 versions later, the thing is finally coming out on January 1st. Right. But, then my dad comes back, and he goes, he's more flustered now, and he's just like, "Not that you're stupid. I think your decisions are stupid. I think they're impatient, and you're making rash decisions, and it's not what's best for your boys." And that is immediately where everyone goes next, right? Is like, how
Yeah.
are you going to pay boys? How are you going to take care of your kids? Like, this is not okay, And um, and it's as weird as it sounds, but like my dad was very much a company man, working for the same company for 35 years. And although he liked like his general job, he was the trucker and he liked being on the road. He liked driving, got to drive through the mountains every day. Like he liked it. As much as he liked it, he didn't like the hours. There were so many things he didn't like about his life that when he said I was stupid and I was probably on the wrong path, I took that as a sign that I was probably very much on the right path, or at least getting closer to what the right path was. I still couldn't tell you I found it, but yeah, people did not. Most people thought I was nuts. And it's funny, like when you behave or you act in a way that, as you said earlier, maybe I was acting bravely, which I still don't feel like. I just feel like maybe I
Oh, I
was.
think
I don't
it's
know.
courageous to break out
Courageous.
of
Thank you.
something. No, it's just
Yeah.
very hard, right? I
Yeah.
think it's courageous to make a change like that. But you know what quotation keeps floating through my mind is if you do
What?
what everyone else does, you'll have what everyone else has. And you didn't want to have what everyone else had. And the system seemed like it could be tweaked to you. So you took a step out. And that to me is brave and makes sense.
No, I appreciate that. I like that. Courageous. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah. Yeah. I
But that,
was.
that most people are not going to understand that because that's not the majority view. And most people are too afraid to make a big change like that.
Yeah. And
But
I think,
I think you're going to
when you
help
say that, all
people
I.
with the book, though. The book will help people see like what you learned and how you can help, and they can help them and they
Oh,
can
I
make it
appreciate it.
better. So let's talk
Yeah.
about that. The book sounds amazing. I love that you sent it to me because I've been scanning it and I can really relate to it because I have been in
Really.
the corporate world a long time.
Yeah.
Um, and why don't you talk a little bit about what you share because it's so cool, like how we view work and its connection to our self-worth, the 80/20 rule and how to fulfill your time effectively. These are things we need to know.
Sure. Sure. I'd love to. So my book, it really started in a meeting. I was running my own team at this point. And I said, they asked me, they knew I didn't have the kids that weekend. And so my team asked me like, Sean, what'd you get up to this weekend? And I was like, well, I started, just writing a book. And two of my youngest, who I just recruited right out of college, I got like two or three college new grads every year on my team. They stopped immediately, and they could have just been being very nice to the boss, but they stopped immediately and was like, "We would read that book." And so initially, I think my first name on my book. Someone asked me about this last week. I think the first name on my book was like the New Grad's Guide to Corporate America. Or to climbing the ladder or something. It was like the New Grad's Guide to Climbing the Ladder. And it started out very much as like just a how to free up your time, make more money, and navigate corporate America. Um, and and so that's where you get the 80/20 rule. That's where you get my rules for how to manage meetings. That's where I went to a bunch of email trainings when I was in corporate, and it was all about how to manage your email because I was working for three directors when I first started my career, where it was like there was so much work. When you're an underling, as anyone knows, or a grunt, oftentimes there's so much work being piled on at you that if you don't figure out how to prioritize and do things in the right order, um, everyone's going to say they're upset with you, and that's the worst thing when everyone's upset with you who's above you as a grunt to be, because it means you're probably not good at your work, even if it just means you're overwhelmed and people are giving you their own work, right?
Good
Um,
point.
and yeah, and so in a lot of my book, it was stuff that I learned. I had problems, and then I'd go to my mentor and say, "Hey, like I have about 60 hours of work to do this week. I have too much, and I probably have another 12 hours of emails I have to get through." And then she'd send me to a training, or she'd give me her tips on how to manage it. And you start to ask enough people, and before you know it, you start to develop a method of how to handle that. And that method was the same one that I used when I was effectively doing two jobs, right? When I was training my replacement to take over my largest accounts, and then also doing the roles of a director of consulting. There was, before I got into that nice coast area where I was making the most and working the least, there was probably 60, 65 hours of work easy every week that I just couldn't handle. And so that system the system I outlined in the book came
Really
handy in
important.
terms of
Yeah.
doing
People
that transition.
people are drowned in emails and
Oh,
I've
yeah.
seen that, I don't know when this started, but people have meetings back to back. The more important you are, the more meetings you seem to have. And it's like,
Oh, yeah.
how can anyone work like that? And then people are multitasking during the meeting because you can't work like that. It's just insane. So it's good
Yeah.
that you offer those methods.
No, I appreciate that. I think when you say that, a key point I wanna say to our listeners too is it's very important you redefine, excuse me, like what is productivity and what is output. And
Oh yeah.
so I guess the free exercise. You don't even have to buy my book for this exercise, but the free exercises, especially with the holidays and the new year and any breaks you have coming up with spring break and everything. If you work in corporate, I would recommend just like take 10 minutes, or 5 minutes, and think about what you did the day before or the day before that. Or, if it's Friday, think about what you did on Monday. And if you're like me and you use your calendar for everything, you could probably look back and go, oh, on calendar, I did this and I did this and I did this and I did 4 hours of email and I did all of this. But for most of us, looking back, we're like, I don't even know what I did on Tuesday. I know I worked 9 hours, or I know I worked 7 hours, but I have no idea what I actually got done, like what was
Right.
actually helpful. And so a big shift in my career, and I think I go into this in the book, is defining like what is productivity, like what are the
That's good.
things that you actually need to get done in a day. And the scenario I give to my readers is, imagine an emergency happens. You come into the office, it's 9 o'clock, or you're working from home. You sit down in front of the computer, it's 9 a.m. And imagine you have 15 or 20 minutes, and then an emergency erupts. Your kids call you. Their school's on fire or something, or I don't know, your mom's in the hospital and you need to dash out of the office and you only have time for one thing. What is that one thing you would do, so you don't have to start tomorrow in the same place you are today, right? Assuming the emergency is a 1 day thing. And so,
Oh, that's excellent. No, that's really good.
yeah,
And what I'm hearing too is that you're kind of helping people break that. I think a lot of us, if we don't do that, we just react to whatever comes, whatever gets our attention, the
well
shiny
said.
thing. And that's not productive. That's really good. I wish
Yeah.
I wish I had done more of that myself all these years.
I appreciate that. Well, yeah, and I think as we've talked about at length now you have, like you have this layer of management in a lot of corporations that get paid so much and they have really nothing to do. And one of my favorite quotes, Lynn, is people who are by definition very unproductive will use the majority of their time appearing to be productive versus actually being productive. And it's the idea that, yeah, you have this whole layer in corporate America now that's giving other people work that really doesn't need to get done. And I don't think they're necessarily doing it maliciously. I think maybe like I was in the role, you start to lose your mind and you're like, oh my God, like I'm making good money. I need to earn this, I need to contribute. And so you start giving people more stuff to do and you really don't have to. Maybe sometimes as to be a great leader, you just have to cut things out for people. There's this great experiment. I don't talk about it in my book, but there's this great experiment where they researchers took like a Lego bridge, and if you imagine like just this bridge made of Legos, one side is taller than the other, and they give it to participants with like a box of Legos next to it, and they're saying, okay, fix it however you want. And it's like 100 or 99% of participants will start grabbing Legos out of the box and adding to the size that's too short to level the bridge. When in actuality, the easiest way to solve the bridge problem is by removing like 3 layers of bricks from the size that's too big. And that's a lot of the methodology that's throughout my book is like removing things actually will allow you to do better work. It'll allow you to get more done, and it'll really free up your cognitive ability to focus on the stuff that matters
I
because
love that image. Yeah, that's such a great way of explaining. I love Legos.
oh yeah, me too.
I always did
Good.
Legos with my son. I love and my daughter. But that's such a great image because yeah, that's not something you think of right away. Also, what I'm thinking too is like a lot of us, and I've done the same thing, we need to put our mark on something. We feel
Hmm.
like we have to. It's like ego. And
Well
I've,
said.
because I'm a writer, I'm always being edited by someone else. And, even when it might not be necessary, they have to edit it.
Right.
It's like you get used to that. And you see it in other areas where people just need to I touched this, I approved this, they need to put their mark on it. And so if you can quiet your ego, it's a much better leader, right? Because you're not going to always have to do that. It is a lot of busy work or unnecessarily drawing attention to yourself. And I love the whole idea of take some away so that you just must have they must miss you because you really
I
empowered them, like that's great. Love that.
appreciate that. I appreciate that. Yeah, I guess towards the end, I really embraced my role as like I'm a fixer, like I'll give the ball to my running back. I am not a football guy, but the analogy, right, is I'll give
It
the ball to my
works. It
running back.
works. Yeah.
Thank you. And if they fumble it, my job is to recover it and try again, and
Yeah.
dust off my running back and say, hey, you can do better. Here's the ball again. Go. My job is not to prevent them from making mistakes. They don't learn, and I don't learn how much they can handle with that. And so it's,
Yeah.
my job is as a firefighter. It's not as a fire preventer, is another way to put it, I guess. And I appreciate that. Yeah, I think when I embraced that on my team, we were able to grow quite a bit very fast, and everyone took on a lot of responsibility. And yeah, I guess I put myself out of a job, which was nice, which was nice. Besides the guilt and all the anxiety, it was nice, yeah, to be out of a job.
So the book comes out January 1st.
It comes out January 1st. Yeah, it's on Kindle. It's called Hacking the Corporate Jungle: How to Work Less, Make More, and Actually Like Your Life. It's on Kindle, all the major stops. It's Barnes and Noble, Kindle, iBooks, and then it's in a few local. I'm from Denver, still live in Denver, Colorado, and so it's in a
Huh?
few local coffee book and coffee shops around here as well.
And it sounds like it's moved from, you were focusing at first recent grads, but it really applies to, I mean, I would definitely read this book. It applies to all of us.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was one of my first editors read it and was like, I don't think you're actually writing a book for new grads. I think you're writing a time management book for the new age. And I was like, well, I like
Yeah.
your lingo. Can I use that? Like,
But that's
yeah.
so cool because you were seeing changes and you were really thinking about it, right? About
Mhm.
what the future looked like. And you're going to help people deal with that because there's a lot of stuff coming at us, the AI stuff and the trying to understand also the remote, versus not remote. Like that's such a big thing now. They're trying to force people back to work. But I don't
Well
know,
said.
that ship has sailed. Where
I agree. I think it's a power struggle. I think, that, like those in charge are being like, well, how do we do our jobs well if we can't watch you and we can't keep you in
yeah,
your little confined cubicles? And the short answer is right is your job shouldn't be supervising people. Like maybe
yeah,
our society or our workforce has started to evolve past needing
yeah.
immediate supervisors.
I mean,
Um,
I'm old enough to remember going
yeah,
in every day, driving far, the wasted time, right? And just accepting it. But also that it was more about like a factory mentality, like you have to be here so many hours, and that equals
yeah.
work. And like it didn't matter if you got stuff done or not. Eventually they would figure it out, perhaps that you weren't doing anything. But a lot of people, they just were there, it's like putting in their 8 hours.
That's the truth.
And I remember one time we had a snow day. This is like a long, long time ago, probably like late 80s. We had
Okay.
a snow day, right? And it was a sizable corporation. And they said, I got in, I made my way in. It was really hard. I wasn't
Right.
far away, thank goodness. And there were no mountains. So I got in and I sat there for like an hour, hour and a half. And my boss came in and he's like, well, we'd like you to try to get here. If you can get here, then we're calling it early because it's snowing so hard. And I'm like, turn around and go back, drive in the active snowstorm to go home. There was that kind of mentality, like you have to get here, no matter what, and you have to sit there. So hopefully we're moving away from that because
No,
I've
I
never been
agree.
more productive than being at home, especially for some jobs, I'm sure it doesn't work as well, but for a writer, it's like blessing because you can work extra long and you have that time to think and you don't feel like you're working extra long because you're not commuting. And with all the interactive connections we have, all the applications, where I used to be on a project where every morning I met with a team from India every morning, and it was evening for them, and it was we moved through our features of the software release, and
It's
it
wild,
was
isn't it?
great.
It's like, what time is it locally? It's like it's 7 a.m. and it's like it's 8 p.m. here. What is happening? Like, yeah, I could
You had to
relate.
get a
I could
little
relate.
used to that, right? You had to say good morning, good
Yeah,
evening. Just there's
exactly.
it's just there's a lot of potential there. So I love that this book is looking at that. Like it's going to be harder to manage your time the old way. That's what I'm hearing. And I love that you're offering alternatives.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I spent 2.5 years all in, I think, writing the book and researching for it because as small and as humble as my initial I guess draft was, it really blows up. I mean, Lynn, as a writer, sometimes if you don't stay very strict on what the vision is or what the goal is, the problem can manifest and be huge. And then, your research takes you down all these rabbit holes, and then before you know it, you're looking at how to fix the world. and
It is
and
really hard.
yeah,
Very
and I
hard
went
to
down
stay.
a. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
How did you do that though? How did you manage that?
Well, honestly, I would say this is part one. I went for, okay, this corporation has problems. It shouldn't be, it shouldn't, in a true economic system, you probably shouldn't make the most and work the least. That doesn't make sense, right? That's an echo of colonialism or an echo of elitism. Like that, in today's world, like I thought we were past that. So that shouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I started with that problem. And then eventually, as you really dig in, you start to realize like, corporations with their fiduciary duties for leaders, which for those of you who don't know, like even if a leader morally wants to do a different thing, like they don't want to lay off 100 people, if the financiers and their accounting teams and stuff say, hey, this is the most prudent and the best decision right now, they are literally legally obligated to lay off those people. And do what they think is best. Or depending on the board and their major investors, they're risking their own career to then have to go in front of the board and explain to them like, hey, I'm making a 4-year bet instead of doing what's most prudent for our bottom line right now and laying those people off. And so I started with, okay, I think the problem is just in this one corporation. And then it kind of blows up to actually it's all of corporations. And then you get to, oh my gosh, it's the economy. And so it like led me down all these different research avenues and where debt comes from and the origins of money and some fascinating stuff. And so I would say this is part one. Like we need people to disconnect their self-worth from their work, and we need people to work less so they can calm themselves, and I would say center themselves and like find their own spirituality and find their own peace and find who they are. Because to your point, we have so much coming at us right now. And I think one of the opinions is, oh, the world's ending. And my former wife would tell you all that I see the world through money and through economic terms. And working in big data, I actually had access to databases that help me, evaluate this in a way that I don't think most people are privy to. And so I was very blessed for that. But what I'm trying to say is, we already have an economic crisis on our hands, and we're struggling emotionally and psychologically how to deal with it. Like we don't have enough jobs for everyone. And, you think about how many people get paid astronomical amounts to play professional sports, how many people get paid to just talk about those players playing professional sports.
Yes.
How many, like when you think about what essential work is and running a city and running a society, we have the majority, I think it's like 60 or 70% of people now in non-essential roles, because we're all struggling to figure out, how to pay our bills and how to contribute, when in fact there's we've gotten so efficient and we've advanced technologically so much that there really isn't enough work for all of us. And I think the first take, and you get this in the news all the time, is, oh my gosh, this is a crisis. We need to roll back AI and we need to roll back robotics engineering, and we need to stop this. And I think the question I want to pose to the world, and this will be in my next book, right? Like this book one is for setup, is okay, in a world where we don't all have to work, what does our daily lives look like? How do you choose who works, and then how do you spend the majority of your time? And that brings me back to one of the first points of research that I uncovered when I was going down one of these rabbit holes, Lynn, was there was a economist back in the 1930s, right around, ironically, a contemporary of Henry Ford, who helped roll out the 40-hour work week. And his name was John Maynard Keynes. And he predicted that his great-grandchildren, that's us, by 2030, he predicted that his great-grandchildren, or us, and our biggest problem would be figuring out, due to labor-saving technologies, what to do with all of their free time. And I think we're having that right now. Like, and I think there are some, not to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I think, my research pointed and uncovered a lot of, I would say, nefarious interests and lobbying groups who want to keep people busy. So we're not paying attention to, them stealing from us and everything that's happening in society that's not kosher, or it's not good. But I think the majority of us, I like to think that the majority of us are struggling to figure out how we fit into a society and what a society looks like when we don't have to work all the time. Because we've done it.
You've got that bigger picture. I love that you've done that research.
Thanks.
And you have that bigger picture. There's a transformation happening. And I we don't know how to do it. We're moving to a whole different age, definitely.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
And
And it like,
we need different tools. So we need a different way to be and how to define what our life looks like and productivity looks like. The
I
40-hour
love
work
that.
week is not cutting it.
I
So
couldn't agree more.
just
Can you edit my next book, Lynn? This is great. This is fantastic.
would love to. You're speaking my language. No, I could probably talk to you for 2 hours. I really love what you're doing. And I'm really looking forward to um, hearing what my listeners think. They love the story, but they also will love the information because who doesn't love something you can use? It's almost like you wrote a guidebook, which I love. I love practical information that people can make sense of for their lives. So thank you for that. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you would like to talk about?
I would say just one thing. When I first, I guess, started on this journey, and I sat down at my desk. I quit my job, and my last day was Friday. On Monday, I sat down at my desk in true workaholic fashion and wrote for 5 hours straight. And at that time when I sat down, I was very naive in the fact that I thought I'll solve the issue, and I will come up with the best idea, the great idea, and I'll just roll it out to the world, and I'll get on great shows like yours, Lynn, and I'll preach my message, and everyone will get online, and then I'll lead the way into this new era, in this new transformation. And the more and more you research, and the more you learn, the more humble you get, thank God, and the more I realized that like this solution would be decentralized. And what I mean by that is rather than me being this hierarchical figure, or rather than our, president, whoever they are, rather than this authoritarian figure telling us this is the way the new world's going to work and this is how we do this, the new paradigm, or the new way we organize all of this is really going to be based on what we call in computer sciences like network effects. And what I mean by that is like everyone's little contribution to this system is going to in turn make a better system. And so I would just say to all you listeners, like you probably know something to a degree that I don't. You almost undoubtedly know something and have an expertise in something that I don't. I'd love to talk about it. One. And two, we need your expertise. Like to build a better world, everyone needs to be involved, and we all need to be communicating and putting aside our egos, as you said earlier, Lynn. And we all need to really be like in it for each other, and together.
Yes.
And I think that's like the biggest lie throughout history is, like although there have been geniuses and great minds throughout history, like those weren't the people who necessarily spread their own ideas. It was the masses who adopted it and recognized it for brilliant, that really or really insightful, that passed it along. And so I'd say,
Yeah.
we all need to do this together. And if you're, stuck in corporate America, as Lynn and I were, for 10 hours or 12 hours a day, like you probably don't have the energy or time to contribute your part. And I'm really betting that's why you're here right now, is because your part is very much needed. And we need you to stop working so much. Like, you're the medicine, we need you to join in. Yeah.
I love that because you see a new way, and that's a wonderful, hopeful message. Thank you. How can people reach you? What's the best way to reach you? I'll put it all in the
You
show
can find me
notes,
on my
but
book.
I like to say it. Yeah, I like to say it on the episode because some people don't read the show
Oh
notes.
yeah.
Is there a
Sure.
website?
So you can find me on my website. It's SeanMcMann.com. That's SeanMcMann.com. You can
Okay.
sign up for my newsletter there. You can get all of the links to all the different books, formats. Next month, I'll be rolling out a one-on-one coaching program. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to reach out.
Well,
I've
that
had quite
sounds
a bit
great.
of yeah, thanks. I've had quite a bit of interest and demand in it, and so just to make sure I can do right by my new clients, I'm only going to be taking on 3 new clients at first.
Smart.
And so if you're interested in being one of those first 3, please let me know.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Like I said, we're gonna have to have you back for part 2 because
I would love
there's a
to.
lot to be said. I love talking to you. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks for having me, Lynn. It's been my pleasure.